the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done.
Well, good Monday morning, everyone. Did you have a good weekend? Well, I know I did. I'm really excited about getting going with this week. This week came about a little bit differently than most all of our other weeks. And I say that because usually I plan and pray and so on. And Lord, what do you want me to do? This time I was reading through my Bible, my morning readings, and right now I'm in the book of Mark. And I came to Mark chapter 8, and I was just reading it like any other morning, and it just hit me. There are so many personal applications in this chapter. Not that there aren't in others times, but just the length of the stories and the length of the miracles and the thought-provokingness that it gave me. And I thought, I just want to share this chapter, though it's not a famous one particularly, with my friends on Inspiration for Today. So that's what we're going to Mark chapter 8 this week. And you can be one of the best experts on Mark's chapter 8 because we're going to really study it through. But study it mostly in the sense of, what does this mean for me? But also in terms of just some good insight of why Jesus did what he did. And that's always worthwhile, isn't it? So Mark chapter 8, and this very first incident, it may seem familiar to you. And some people have said that they're one and the same with when Jesus fed the 5,000. Remember that story? Well, this is a time, well, you'll see the difference right off, I think. Okay, during those days, another large crowd gathered, and since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called the disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance. And then his disciples answered, but when this remote place, how can we get enough bread to feed them? How many loaves do you have? Jesus said. 7. And he told the crowd to sit down on the ground. And when he had taken the 7 loaves, he gave thanks. He broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And they had a few small fish as well. And he gave thanks for them. And he distributed them that day. The people ate and were satisfied, and afterwards the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 4,000 men were present, and having sent them away, he got into the boat and the disciples and went to a different region. This time there were 4,000. So that was different, and the amount of loaves and fishes that he had was also different. Now, I want us to ask ourselves one simple question. Why did Jesus do this? He'd already shown his power, hadn't he, in terms of feeding a large crowd. So it wasn't for that reason. Well, he tells us one of the reasons right in verse 2. Verse 2. He says what? He says, I have compassion for these people. So right off, we know that one of the reasons that Jesus did this miracle is that he really cared about the people. And he really wanted to meet their needs. Isn't that a great lesson for us? Because Jesus absolutely knows your needs and my needs. And he has compassion. He has compassion on them if it's the right thing for us. Because a lot of times we think we have needs that I'm not so sure when seen in the whole overview of it, sometimes they're wants, aren't they? There's a big difference between wants and needs. But a true need, Jesus has compassion, and indeed, he does fulfill them. So just meeting the current needs right then of the people right then is one of the reasons. But there is another overriding and big reason that Jesus did all the miracles that he did. And have you ever wondered about that? Well, actually, the Bible tells us why Jesus did those miracles. There's a lot of conjecture, but the Bible tells us. Don't you think we ought to rely on that? He had just done a miracle. And then verse 30, Jesus did many other miracles, miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. Isn't that something? Jesus did so many miracles and so many. The Bible couldn't begin. No book could begin to hold all of them. And that's what it says. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and by believing you may have life in his name. That was verse 31. So John, the Apostle John, makes it very clear why Jesus did miracles. These are written that you may believe, that you may believe. So one of the reasons that Jesus fed the 4,000 that day, 2,000 years ago, is so that you and me can believe in him. Because you know what? If it didn't happen, and if that isn't how it went down that day, then there were going to be 4,000 people, actually men, so there were more, probably double that, maybe 8,000 people in all, who could say, no, he didn't do that. The Bible's false. And most believe that Peter is the mind behind, that Mark wrote down what Peter had to say. But those 4,000 people would know that that wasn't true. And they would have thrown out the letter from Mark immediately as false. And they did not do that. Why? Because it was true. Who could do any of these miracles like that? He multiplied those loaves and fishes to the point where they were picking up leftovers, and the leftovers were more than what they started with. That is a miracle. And why did he do it? To feed the people, meet their immediate need. And second, these are written so that you may believe that he is indeed the miracle worker. He is God. That Jesus, you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And that then, because by believing in him, what? You may have life in his name. You may have eternal life in his name. That's why he did it. Because he loves you 2,000 years later, and he wants you to believe. He asks Peter to tell Mark. Mark writes it down so that you and I may believe. When you read any other miracles, it's the same reason. These are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. That's why Jesus did miracles. Every story this week is going to be like that, challenging and good insight. I hope you join me all week. See you tomorrow. God bless. Walk closely with your God, the miracle maker God. See you tomorrow.
Come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory.